All right, welcome back. So, here are a few thoughts from John Gottman. Communication may not resolve conflicts that arise due to a negative or poor perception or the poor perception you have or you hold of your spouse. There's something we call the law of attribution in psychology. The law of attribution. What does that mean? It means that if I make a mistake or if I do something wrong, I didn't mean it. I didn't intend it. It was just a mistake. I just was having a bad day. But if it was your spouse that made that mistake, that my spouse has a character problem. My spouse is always annoying me. My spouse is not always seeking my best interest. So the law of attribution is that bias in your brain that says to you that anytime you do not do the right thing or you make a mistake, it was just a mistake. You didn't intend it. But anytime your spouse makes a mistake, it is about their character. That's what we call the law of attribution. So John Gottman is saying, if you already have a negative or a poor impression of your spouse, it does not matter what your spouse does or what your spouse does not do. You will always seek for ways to nail your spouse. So if you're in a marriage where there is nothing you do that is okay for your spouse, there is nothing you do. If you do this, your spouse will complain. If you do that, your spouse will complain. If you don't do this, your spouse will complain. If you don't do that, your spouse will complain. It is likely that your spouse does not see you from a very good place. That's why. That's why it does not matter what you do. You will always be blamed. And some of you are like that. It does not matter how well your spouse tries. It's just one fly. Because you always attribute all their errors or mistakes to their character. So John Gottman is saying the only way to resolve that is not to keep talking about it. It's not to keep calling for a meeting. It's not to keep asking for therapy. It's not to always, let's talk about it. Because talking will never solve that problem. The only thing that will solve that problem is for you to sit down and begin to adjust the impression you have of your spouse in your brain. That's the only thing. You need to change that impression. You need to tell yourself that my spouse is not perfect, but my spouse is a good person. Have that conversation with yourself. It's very important. So it's possible that a lot of unresolved issues in your marriage is traceable to the fact that it is difficult or impossible for you to see your spouse as a good person. Your spouse is so familiar with you, or you are so familiar with your spouse such that you don't see your spouse as a good person. You just believe that he or she is just a bad person. You are good to everybody else, but you are a bad person to me. So it doesn't matter how hard your spouse tries. You are in a position you've taken a position of judgment, of criticism, right? And another way you know is that anytime your spouse brings up something that he or she is not happy with, you are very defensive. You are always quick to say, so your spouse is saying, I'm not happy with blah, blah, blah. I say, how about, do you think I am happy with blah, blah, blah? Your spouse is sharing with you something that is important to him or her. You are already ready. You are ready with, well, this is what you also do to me. You are always very defensive. That is a key. That is a clue to letting you know that you need to decongest. You are not seeing your spouse in a good light. So it doesn't matter what your spouse does. Your spouse will always be wrong. And you know something, if you don't do the work, let me tell you what happens. The devil can see clearly that you don't respect your spouse. The devil can see clearly that you will never give your spouse a chance. The devil can see. So what the devil does is to leverage on that existing problem to build this castle. You won't stand a chance. You won't stand a chance. Right? That's what John Gottman said. Right. So what did God? So in follow up to that, John Gottman said, and I have to write it down so that I'll read it to you. Develop a more positive outlook towards your spouse. Develop it. That is an internal work. You don't need your spouse to cooperate with you for you to do this. This one is work you do by yourself. You sit down and you start reminding yourself that your spouse is a good person. Your spouse may not have gotten everything right. He or she may not have made you happy, but your spouse is a good person. And from my study, I also realized that many people have good spouses. Your husband is a good person, your wife is a good person, but the devil has succeeded in blindfolding you so much that you can't see the good anymore. And you know what? That is what he has to do to finish your marriage. All right? So for you to believe or to think that your spouse is a bad person, you may be under demonic attack. right? You may just be under demonic manipulation. Please take that log off your eyes. It's not helping. And I'm not saying that every bad thing that your spouse has been doing to you is justified. No, it's not justified. It's not good enough. And you probably don't deserve that. All right? So I'm not saying you deserve what you are getting. That's not what I'm saying. Okay? That's number one. So, how do you begin to do this? John Gottman also suggests what he calls attunement. 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 And there are keys he suggests. So, how do you attune? How do you turn towards your spouse in spite of all these negativities, all these conflicts, that you've had to deal with over the years? Number one, attune is an acronym. A for awareness. Know your partner's word. God. Some of us have been married for years, but we don't know our spouse. We don't know who we are married to. And that alone is a disservice. You need to know your spouse. So be aware. Family life practitioners will say three reasons why marriages die. Reasons why marriages die. Number one, lack of awareness of self. Number two, lack of awareness of who you are married to. Number three, lack of awareness of the marriage institution. Those three things are one of the common reasons why marriages end in divorce. Okay? Lack of awareness of self, you don't know yourself. You are 30, but you don't know yourself. You are 35, but you don't understand yourself. What does it mean to know yourself? Understand your strengths. Understand your weaknesses. Understand your triggers. Understand your trauma. Understand where you are coming from. How you were raised. And understand how that has played a role in your current likes and dislikes and your irritations. Understand that. Be self-aware. Understand that you're not perfect. Understand that you have weaknesses too. And understand that the fact that you have weaknesses does not mean you're a bad person. But if you do not consciously take steps to be better, you might just end up being not so good. So self-awareness. Then spouse awareness. Understand who you are married to. These are the things that will not fly with my spouse. I remember those days I used to, sometimes I would just send a message to my wife joking and I would say, Ma, how are you, Ma? Or thank you, Ma. My wife didn't like it. She doesn't like it. Meanwhile, I remember the times I did it in the past. It was just a joke. But it took me a while to understand that will not sound like a joke to her. She doesn't like me using Ma. Whether as a joke or no joke, it just won't fly. Why would you be calling me Ma? Right? It took me a while to understand that. But I had to be conscious enough to understand that I can joke with other people and say, how are you, Ma? Even when the person is far younger than I am. How are you, Ma? Sorry, Ma. Well done, Ma. How is your day going, Ma? But I can't do that with my wife because that's not one of the things that she considers a joke. That's awareness. This won't fly. But with me and you, I could joke saying Ma to you. It might not mean much. It might not be a big deal. So some of you have not studied your spouse enough to understand what works and what does not work. And that is what is working against you. So John Gottman, steps to having a better outlook, awareness. Be aware. Be aware of yourself. Be aware of the kind of person you are married to. That will help you. All right? Next thing, turn towards. What does that mean? Positive response to the bid for connection that your spouse brings. So maybe you just had a conflict. You just had a heated argument or whatever. And then your spouse comes to ask you, what are you going to eat? Instead of you being too angry, like, well, we just had an argument 5 minutes ago. Take that as a bid from your spouse to connect. Just like Kingsley Okonkwo will always say, the way guys apologize is not the same way women expect apology. So two guys can fight right now, have a bad argument, blah, 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 and then the next 5 minutes, one of the guys could tell the other guy, did you see the match between Nigeria and Ivory Coast? In his own opinion, that is a form of apology. That's how guys, make up. Yeah, we quarreled yesterday, but today I'm asking you about the match. It is my way of seeking connection without necessarily saying, guy, I know I messed up yesterday. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those words to you. I shouldn't have, blah, 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 blah. But that's me making up. Yeah. That's me making up, right? Good. So sometimes you had an argument or you had a fight or something, you're not happy about something, and your spouse comes around and says, Would you like a drink? Accept it as a bid for connection. So John Gottman is saying, if you keep rejecting your spouse's bid for connection just because you are still angry, or you are still blaming your spouse for what he or she did or did not do last week or yesterday, if you keep avoiding those bids for connection, you are drowning your marriage. You are drowning your marriage. Can you guys still hear me? Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. You are drowning your marriage. So, I'm telling you how to work above conflicts now. That's what I'm teaching you. Number one, awareness. Be aware of yourself. Be aware of your trauma. Be aware of your triggers. Be aware of your weaknesses. Be aware. If you talk too much, you should be aware that I know that one of my weak points is that I talk too much. Be aware. Why do you need your spouse to be telling you that after he has told you before or she has told you before? You should already know that. I know one of my weak points is that I just, I go overboard. I can talk. And it's sometimes a problem. Okay? Good. So be aware. Number two is turn towards. So accept your partner or your spouse's bid for connection and accept it, appreciate it. So your spouse says good morning. You had a fight last night before you went to bed. And your spouse says good morning. That's a bid for connection. Say good morning back. Maybe you're still not happy. It's fine. But accept the good morning. Not throw your face and like good morning for what's good about the morning. No, that's childish. Take the good morning. Do you know, I realize that maturity is you not being too happy but still being able to be nice when you're not happy. It's maturity. So you are immature if when you are unhappy, everybody must know that you're unhappy. You're childish. When you're angry, everybody must know that you're angry. You're childish. So you must be able to manage your emotions such that you can maintain balance even when you are provoked. We are not saying you're not provoked. And sometimes the reason for your anger is valid. You have a right to be angry. Please, note that you have a right to be angry when you're angry. You have a right. But how you express that anger is the difference between maturity and immaturity. So I'm not blaming you for getting angry. I'm not blaming you because you are provoked. I'm not blaming you because you are not happy about something. No, I can't blame you for that. But what I blame you for is what you do in spite of the fact that you're not happy or in spite of the fact that you're angry. That's what I blame you for. Psychology tells us that you cannot be angry and happy at the same time. So if you really want to be happy, you need to check your anger. Because both of them are not friends. They don't happen together. So for every second you spend in anger, you have denied yourself a second of happiness. For every second you spend in anger, you have denied yourself a second of happiness. Right? So awareness, turn towards your spouse, take every bit of connection. Number three, tolerance. What does that mean? Recognize and respect your partner's perspective, even when you do not agree with their opinion. That's tolerance. So both of you, you need to decide on the school your child will go to. You need to decide on what to invest in. You need to decide on what you will take for dinner. You need to decide where you want to go spend the summer. And then your spouse is not agree with your opinion, and you are not happy because you have clear facts for the reasons why you are proposing what you are proposing, and your spouse does not seem to see or agree. You need to be able to still respect your spouse's opinion even when you do not agree with your spouse's opinion. Right? That is tolerance, and that's also maturity. Next point, understand. What does this mean? Seek first to understand your spouse before you even attempt to express your thoughts or feelings. Look, if you want to do well in your relationships, understanding the other person is what should be paramount to you than you saying your point. Some people have sold their peace in the name of selling a point. And a lot of times in your relationship, you will need to make a decision between your point and your peace. Your point and your peace. You will need to make a decision between your point and your peace. Every time when your point weighs more than your peace, know that the devil is selling you a bad deal. At no point in your marriage should the point you want to make be more important than the peace you need to promote. All right? So seek first to understand. The laws of, the 7 laws of, what do they call it? 7 laws of leadership, or the 7 laws of higher achievers or something. One of it is seek first to understand than to be understood. So it is paramount for mature people to be willing to understand the other person first before you express your thoughts. All right? That's very important. And then the other part is be non-defensive. Just listen. How can you be non-defensive? Be willing to listen. Right? The Bible says that we should listen more than we talk. The book of James. They said we should be more interested in listening than in to talk. Foolish people talk more than they listen. Wise people listen more than they talk. I'll say that again. Foolish people talk more than they listen. Wise people listen more than they talk. So if you have doubled the capacity of your mouth against the capacity of your ear, you are foolish. Right? Then the last point on that note is empathy. Empathy, validation and tenderness. Validation, tenderness, and kindness for your spouse's feelings. Look, this works like juju. It works like jazz, right? I have seen a number of studies and videos that buttresses this point, that sometimes conflicts linger because nobody is validating anybody. So if you want to lessen the conflict in your relationship, if your spouse is angry about something, or your spouse expresses a negative feeling over something, even when you don't understand it, acknowledge the emotion. Validate the emotion. Validation helps. Validation, it will go a long way. Oh, so sorry you feel that way. I'm not happy because blah, 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 blah. Oh, so sorry. I mean, you don't agree. In fact, what your spouse may be expressing may be childish to you, but you don't tell your spouse that's childish. You validate the emotion, validate the feeling, even when you don't understand why they are throwing tantrums for that reason. You don't understand it. Is it because of this? That's why you are behaving like this? Don't say that. I'm not asking you to say that, but validate the feeling. People feel better when they feel validated. And when people feel validated, they are more willing to engage. They are more willing to deal. What you want is for your spouse to deal. And in order to get that, validate his or her feelings. So that's from John Gottman, right? Solutions to all this conflict and this drama. Solutions, that's what we are discussing. So those are points from John Gottman. Let me move on to Saadia Khan. Saadia Khan. So what did Saadia Khan say? Look, you can Google these people, follow them, and understand their perspective. You don't have to believe me. So what did Saadia Khan say? Saadia, S-A-D-I-A Khan, K-H-A-N, K-H-A-N, Saadia Khan. Saadia Khan said, become a high-value individual. Who is a high-value individual? Now I want you to guess. Who would you consider to be a high-valued individual? 9. Okay, good. Who is a high-valued individual by your own estimation or impression? Before we listen to what Saadia Khan says. Anybody? High-valued individual. Anyone? Anyone? High-valued individual.
Would that be someone that knows their self-worth? That you find happiness in yourself first before you can bring that to the table.
That sounds really good, you know. Someone who understands his or her self-worth. That's very close to what I'm about to read. Very, very close. Very, very close to what I'm about to read. Because you need to understand your self-worth to do or practice what I'm about to read. So, I totally agree with you. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. So, Saadia Khan said, you become a high-valued individual by delaying gratification. And in order to delay gratification, you must understand who you are. Understand your self-worth. Right? So don't sell yourself for cheap because of a current argument, because of a current current disagreement, because of a current situation. Right? Because this situation will pass and you will remain. This situation will pass and you will remain. Right? So I like the point of you understanding yourself. Understand that psychology, studies in psychology says that the implication of rejection on the brain is exactly equal or the same with the impact of a physical injury on the brain. Do you understand that? It means that imagine somebody had an accident and they had to cut off an arm. That's a very serious thing, right? That can be very painful. Now, the impact of that experience on that person's brain is exactly the same impact on your brain anytime you feel rejected. What do I mean? You are trying to sell a product to somebody and the person says, no, I don't need that product. That's rejection, right? Or you ask somebody out, if you are single, you ask somebody out and the person says, oh no, sorry, no, it can't work. Or sorry, I don't see you that way. I just see us as friends. You're not the kind of person I would like to get married to, but we are best as friends. The person turns you down. How you feel when somebody says that? Or when somebody takes somebody else's opinion or idea over yours, how you feel when you get that rejection, right? The impact of that feeling on your brain is the same thing you will feel if you had a physical injury. That's why it's very hard for so many people to handle rejection. But part of growth is you developing capacity to handle rejection better. For you to understand that when somebody says no to my idea, it does not mean no to me as a person. So don't take it personal. Look, what the devil will always want you to do is to take things personal. When your spouse says, I'm angry, you take it personal. When your spouse is not happy about something, you take it personal. When your spouse says your food is not sweet, your stew is not sweet, I don't like your cooking, you take it personal. Every time you take something personal, you're not likely to behave rational. I'll say that again. Every time you take something personal, you're not likely to respond or behave rationally. All right? So, don't take things personal. Right. So, Sadia Khan said, become a high-valued person by delaying gratification. You want to snap, but count 1 to 10. You want to give your spouse a piece of your mind, count 1 to 10. Don't be quick to lash out. You are not portraying yourself as a high-valued person every time you act based on emotions or sentiments. You are not expressing yourself or showing yourself to be a high-valued person. A high-valued person would delay gratification. All right? Develop self-control. Do you know what the Bible says in the book of Proverbs about somebody who does not have self-control? He said, anyone who lacks self-control is like a wall, a house without defense. No gate, no door. Everything is wide open. Criminals can enter, rapists can enter, demons can enter. Everybody with wrong motives can enter because there is no security. So, anyone that does not have self-control is synonymous to a building without defense. All right? So, delay gratification by developing self-control. Remember, self-control is a fruit of the Spirit and it's a trait of high-valued person. Practice patience. Sometimes practice silence. You are very angry. It's not the time to say everything in your head. I just need to speak my mind. That's childish. I've said this a lot at different trainings. Yeah? If you always feel the need to say your mind every time without taking cognizance of how the other person might feel, you are not a high-valued person. You are a cheap person. All right? If you don't have self-control, you are weak. In fact, that's what Sadia Khan said. She's not I don't know if she's a Christian, but when she was speaking, she wasn't speaking from a Christian point of view. She was speaking from psychology point of view. Right? So you're not a high-valued person when you cannot exercise restraint, self-restraint and self-control. Okay? And then finally, she encouraged, think long-term. There will be life after this conflict. There will be life after this argument. There will be life after this disagreement. So why do I want to ruin everything because of this disagreement? Think long-term. Think long-term. Right? That's Sadia Khan. Right? She also added, constantly check your expectations. Because expectations are resentments in the making. Constantly check your expectations. Because expectations are resentments in the making. Constantly check your expectations. Because expectations are resentments in the making. All right? And then number 3, she said, if you continuously pursue happiness, you'll be miserable a lot of the time. Instead, pursue growth, pursue depth, and happiness will be a consequence. All right? That's what she suggests, because the more unhappy you are, the more you are likely to pick quarrels with your spouse. The more unhappy you are, the more you are likely to Pick quarrels with your spouse. Oh my God. So that's all from Sadia Khan. Let's move on. Esther Perel. Esther Perel said, check your expectations. Identify your expectations. And then diversify your expectations. What does it mean to diversify your expectations? Always understand your spouse, that your spouse will not meet all your needs. So if you have been married for at least 6 months to 1 year, you should already know those areas of your needs that your spouse can meet by experience. And that those areas that your spouse cannot meet, are there things that you can meet through someone else? For example, you want your spouse to always advise you in terms of the business you are involved in. But having been married to this your spouse for 6 months to 1 year, you realize that your spouse has not been able to give you quality advice in that area, or your spouse is not forthcoming in that area. Maybe because your line of business is not an area where he or she is conversant with, or maybe your line of business is not that area where your spouse is interested in. Even though I will encourage that your spouse should develop interest in that area, but I'm not your spouse. But you can see that your spouse is not really showing much interest in the area of your business. What does that tell you? It means that as far as your business is concerned, don't look up to your spouse. Stop looking up to your spouse. Stop expecting counsel from your spouse. Stop expecting all of that support from your spouse. Stop it. So as far as your business is concerned, look for a mentor that can guide you, that can advise you, that can support you, that can help you, that can give you the professional expertise or support that you need, not your spouse. So you see, what Esther Perel is saying is identify your expectations, diversify your expectations, because perhaps you are having certain expectations of your spouse that your spouse cannot meet, or that your spouse is not interested in meeting. All right? So are those areas things that you can meet from somebody else? Remember, it's not all the expectations you can meet from somebody else. If it's sexual expectations, am I saying that you should go and meet your neighbor to fulfill that expectation? Am I saying you should go and meet your mentor? Am I saying you should go and meet your pastor? So it also depends on the nature of those areas. But if there are areas like business, like career, and your spouse is not forthcoming, please look up to somebody else for that. So identify your expectations, check your expectations, diversify your expectations, embrace change. Esther Perel is encouraging that you embrace change, and then take responsibility. Take responsibility for repair. So every time you have conflicts with your spouse, take responsibility for repair. How do you take responsibility for repair? Maybe you raised your voice. Take responsibility for that. I know I raised my voice. I'm sorry about that. That's taking responsibility. Rather than saying, if he didn't say that, I would not have raised my voice. If she didn't say that, I would not have raised my voice. It's her fault. That's an abuser. An abuser will always justify his or her misbehavior and pin it on the other person. That's an abuser. You're an abuser if you do that. So the point is you raise your voice. Take responsibility. Stop saying it's because she cannot hear word. That's why I raised my voice. That's abusive. That's manipulative. That's wrong. All right? Good. So that is Esther Perel, right? Mark Twain. Now let's learn from Mark Twain. I will read this to you. Very interesting. Mark Twain said, if you collect 100 black ants, 100 black ants, what time is it? Okay, good. 100 black ants and 100 fire ants. Fire ants are red. So you collect 100 black ants and 100 fire ants and you put them in a jar. He says nothing will happen. That's Mark Twain. Nothing will happen. But if you take that jar and shake it violently, you shake it violently, he said, and after shaking it violently, you leave the jar on the table, right? He said, the ants will start killing each other. Black ants will start attacking the red ants. The red ants will start attacking the black ants. Do you understand? He now said, the red ants believe the black is the enemy, while the black believes the red is the enemy. When the real enemy is no. So this is a quiz now. So you put 100 black ants in a jar, and in the same jar you put 100 fire ants in the jar, and if you put it on a table, nothing will happen. But if you take that jar and shake it violently, shake it, and put it back on the table, he said the black ants will begin to see the red ants as the enemy, and the red ones will begin to see the black ones as the enemy, and they begin to kill each other. So the question is, who is the enemy? And I need an answer. Who is the enemy? Who is the enemy? Is it the black ants or the red ants? Question. Who is the enemy? Who is the enemy? Anyone saying anything? No opinion? Who is the enemy?
The person that shook the jar.
Exactly, bro. The person that shook the jar is the enemy. So that's what happens in marriage too. There's conflict. Husband is not happy with wife. Wife is not happy with husband. Husband believes my wife is my problem. Wife believes my husband is my problem. But the real enemy is not in that marriage. It's outside the marriage. Right? So Mark Twain is suggesting that every time you have a heated argument or you have a serious conflict in your relationship, sit down and be an observer in that scenario and understand that neither of you is the enemy. That's what Mark Twain says. Neither of you is the enemy. So the black ant, husband, is not the enemy. The fire ant, wife, is not the enemy. The enemy is the person who shook the jar. So the question is, who is shaking my marriage jar? Who is shaking my marriage? Who is the person that wants me and my wife to fight? Who is the person that wants I and my husband to fight? Who is the person causing these numerous fights? We fought on Monday, it's just Wednesday we are fighting again. It's not fun. It's not fun. Right? So sometimes it's your past causing the fight. Sometimes it's your emotions, because you're not able to put your emotions in perspective, causing the fight. Sometimes it's the devil just throwing things, and he sits back to see how you play. Right? So that's Mark Twain. So I will wrap up with this from John Maxwell. So these are John Maxwell's thoughts on conflict. 10 points. I'll run over it quickly, then we take questions. So John Maxwell says, the success of your marriage and your life is determined by your ability to work together. So your marriage is not failing because you married the wrong person. No. If you have always believed that you married the wrong person, please debunk that thought, because that's not necessarily true. I know you have issues. It's not been going well in the past 10 years, but that's not a proof, a valid proof that you married the wrong person. So you can marry the right person. Let me tell you something God told me. God said to me, he said, if I come in human form and give you a spouse that I created from the foundation of the earth for you, and I officiate your wedding ceremony, and the pastor who weds you together, who says, I now pronounce your husband and wife, it was God that officiated your wedding. It's not a guarantee that your marriage will succeed. So God bringing both of you together is not a guarantee that your marriage will succeed. How about that? So the devil wants you to believe that you married the wrong person. Yeah, I've been in a place before where I thought my wife was the wrong person. So the devil will always want to prove to you beyond all reasonable doubt that you married the wrong person. Don't swallow that lie. Okay? So John Maxwell said the success of your marriage is highly dependent on how you work together, how you live together, not by your spouse becoming like you, not by my wife becoming like me, or by me becoming like my wife. That's not the idea of marriage. The idea of marriage is not to make spouses the same thing. No. Okay? So what are the 10 things that John Maxwell suggests in terms of conflicts? Right? Number 1, obey the 101% principle. What does that mean? Now, listen to me. I will not repeat it twice because of time. This is 9:42, right? So, let me speed this up. I won't repeat myself. Listen attentively. If you are making notes, make it as simple as possible. You can go back to them. Right. So, John Maxwell said, number 1, obey the 101% principle. What does that mean? Find the 1% that you agree on and give it 100% of your effort. Look, if anybody tells you, they will even quote Bible to you. The Bible says, can two work together except if we agree? Look, we bastardize that scripture. No, in no marriage will you find spouses agreeing on everything. You will not agree on everything. But what is important is when you disagree, what will you do? When your spouse does not agree with you on a matter, what will you do? Okay, that's what is important. That is more important. What you do when there is no agreement is more important than fighting for agreement. Please write that down. What you do, how did I say it? Thank you, my wife. What you do when there is no agreement is more important than what you do. But you heard me, right? So it is not about the agreement. What you do during disagreement is more important than you're fighting for agreement. Yes. What you do during disagreement is more important than you're fighting for agreement. So you will not agree on everything, but what is more important is what you do when there is a disagreement. All right? So John Maxwell is suggesting, John Maxwell now, check him out. He's suggesting that focus on the one thing, and in a lot of cases you will find more than one thing. So what are the areas where I and my wife agree? Maybe we don't agree on many things, but there are a few things where at least we agree, few things. There might not be much. And that's the beautiful thing here. Guys, listen to me. You might not agree on many things, but those few things where at least you agree, put your 100% effort on those things. What the devil is driving you to do is to focus on the areas where you don't agree and to use that to judge the entirety of your marriage. It's wrong. It's wrong. All right? So that's the number one. Obey the 101 principle. Find the 1% where you agree and put 100 efforts on that area. That's number one. Number two, love your spouse more than the opinion. So don't rate your spouse's opinion, especially those opinions that you don't agree with. Don't let the wrong, by your own opinion, the wrong opinion of your spouse, don't let it weigh more than your spouse. Your spouse is more important than our opinion. My wife should be more important to me than our opinion because I don't agree with our opinion. I don't like our opinion. I don't like it. All right? But my wife is more important than that opinion. It's just an opinion. But my wife is more important. So don't consider that opinion that you don't like more important than the person you married. That's the number two suggestion. Focus on the relationship over the issue. Focus on the relationship over the issue. Don't rate the issue over the relationship. So don't use the outcome of the issue to rate your marriage. All right? Love your spouse more than our opinion, more than the opinion. That's number two. Number three, give the benefit of doubt. Most people don't know how to do this. And this is how God put it to me. So your wife does something to you right now that you're not happy with. And then you suddenly forget every other time that she looked for you forget all the other times that she made you happy, all the other times that she made sacrifices, all the other times that she did something good, all the other times that she was amazing. You have suddenly forgotten all of that. It doesn't matter anymore, just because of this one time that she did or did not do. And you know what? That's what we always do. We are quick to forget all the good times. We are always quick to forget the time that your spouse did something that was right. But we always latch in on the times when your spouse did not do something you wanted. Again, how cool is that? So John Maxwell is saying, give the benefit of doubt. Assume right motives from your spouse. Believe in his or her good intentions. So when your spouse does something that is not right or that you don't like, be quick to tell yourself that she must have meant well. If she understood the implication of what she did or did not do, perhaps she would have made a better choice. I'm sure she meant well. I remember one time that I was at the gate and I kept calling my wife, and she didn't pick the phone. That was quite a long time ago. I was very angry, But later when the Holy Spirit was explaining the situation to me, like I said earlier, how about the other times where she was trying to sleep and she fought her sleep because she needed to be awake so that she could open the door? For example, how about the other times where she put her comfort on the line so that I will be comfortable? So how can this one night that I called 10 times 20 times, and because she was asleep, because she was tired, how can it now make a big difference in our relationship? Why? Can you see that that is what some of us do? That we just suddenly forget all the good times because of this bad time. We forget all the good parts. Okay, so John Maxwell is saying, give the benefit of doubt. Assume that he or she has good intentions. All right. Number 4, learn to be flexible. Every rigid person will collect. You will pay dearly for that rigidity. Wisdom means flexibility, adaptability. You must be willing to adapt. Things will not always go your way in your marriage. Things sometimes will go your way, some other times it will go your spouse's way, and some other times it will neither go your way nor his or her way. So be flexible, be adaptable, be like water. All right? Because if you are rigid, you would suffer. People who don't bend in marriage will kill the marriage. If you don't bend in marriage, you will kill your marriage. In order not to kill your marriage, learn to bend, learn to compromise, be adaptable, be flexible. That's number 4. Number 5, provide an escape hatch for your spouse. Yeah? Never let your spouse lose his or her face or dignity, especially in the areas where maybe you are really right and your spouse was wrong. I told you, did I not tell you? Did I not tell you? No, don't do that. So there was a disagreement. You wanted it to go this way. Your spouse insisted on it going that way. And eventually things happened and it was obvious that your spouse was wrong. Don't rub it in. It's childish people that do that. Don't rub it in. Oh, I told you. Yeah, I told you. It's children that do that. Don't do that. Right? Don't do that. Okay, so don't rub it in. Don't rub it in. Don't rub it in. Don't rub it in. All right? Okay, so leave your spouse with his or her dignity, even when it is obvious that he or she was wrong. Leave your spouse with his or her dignity. Save his or her face. Don't push the boundaries such that your spouse loses his or her face. Yeah, just because he or she was wrong. All right. Never let your spouse lose his or her face or dignity. Gently persuade him or her so he or she can compromise without feeling like he or she has lost. That's number 5. Number 6, check your attitude. Check your attitude. What role might you be playing in that conflict? I've said this earlier, so I'm not going to dwell on that. Check your own attitude. Yes, see, it's very important for you to sometimes take yourself out of the picture psychologically and sit down as an observer. So it is your marriage, right? But imagine that you're an observer in this marriage and you're observing husband and wife argue about what you're arguing about. What would you advise? Right? So check your attitude. Look into the mirror. Look into the mirror and advise yourself. That's number 6. Number 7, don't overreact. Oh God, I hope some people will hear this. Don't overreact. Oh, let me say it one more time. Stop overreacting. Stop overreacting. When we overreact, it is usually more about an underlying issue or something from the past that we have not resolved ourselves or within ourselves. So please, don't overreact. That's number 7. Number 8, don't become defensive. By the way, stonewalling or defensiveness is another thing that can kill a marriage. So, John Gottman said, contempt and disrespect is the highest predictor of divorce. Another predictor of divorce is defensiveness or stonewalling. All right, you are not willing to engage or converse. Instead, speak to the hand. That can kill your marriage. Stop doing speak to the hand. Stop being defensive. When your spouse expresses an emotion, you might have a superior argument, but validate that emotion. Sorry you feel that way. I understand that you feel, wow, that would have been worse. I mean, that would have been very hard to deal with. I'm so sorry about that. Validate the emotion. Okay? That's what John Maxwell is saying. Instead of being defensive, validate the emotion. Most conflict is not directly about us. Avoid the blame game. You know what? What God told me is that marriage is like a glass house, very sensitive glass house. Every time you throw stones, you'll be damaging the house. You'll be causing cracks on the wall. So stop throwing stones. What does it mean to throw stone? Blaming the other party. It's your fault. 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 If you did this, that would not have happened. If you didn't do that, that would not have happened. Don't do that. Even when it is true. It might be a fact, but don't do that. Stop throwing blames. Stop throwing stones. All right? Good. Number 9, second to the last point by John Maxwell. Welcome the conflict. Why is he saying that? Because there is no situation that is exactly conflict-free. Is Mrs. Emily on this call? I have a friend, though, very dear friend. She tells me that her and her spouse never fight or argue. Never. They've been married for how long now? Quite a bit of time. Is it 15 years of marriage? And I really wanted her to be here tonight. I wanted to ask her 1 or 2 questions. Right? I know this person one-on-one, so it's not something I read. She tells me to my face that I and my husband, we don't fight. And at some point, like, are you lying? Are you lying? But honestly, she's not one to lie. I'm not saying she's perfect, but she's not one to lie. So I was really looking forward to having her tonight so that I can ask her before you guys, and you guys can ask her questions. Maybe we'll have a session with her, and then let's ask her what the secret is. All right? She said they never fight or argue. So conflict is to the various minimum, if at all. All right? So it's possible. Guys, it's possible. So welcome the conflict. All right? Conflict can either give you ulcer or understanding. So if at all there has to be a conflict in your relationship, let them instruct you, learn more from it, and learn from it such that conflict in that area shouldn't occur again, just because you are learning. That's number 9. Welcome the conflict. And finally, take the risk. What does that mean? This is the hardest part. That's what John Maxwell said. This is the hardest part. Risk being hurt than keeping your spouse at arm's length. All right? So the fact that you had a conflict does not mean you should totally disengage, go far away, don't come home for 1 week, ignore or avoid your spouse totally because I don't want trouble. I can be like that. Some of us are naturally inclined to doing that, but that doesn't speak well for the marriage and it doesn't help. Okay, so in spite of the conflicts, take the risk of drawing close. You want sex, take the risk of initiating sex. You want to apologize, take the risk of saying an apology. And it doesn't mean that you were wrong and the person was right. Take the risk. Remember what James 16 said. He said the hardest thing to do is usually the right thing to do. So it might be hard to take responsibility. It might be hard to want to draw close after a fight. But please, staying farther away for the lengthiest period of time will not work well for your relationship. All right? Don't create a situation or a scenario where you can't have sex again. 1 week you can't have sex because somebody is still angry. 3 weeks you can't have sex because somebody is still angry. The devil can cash in on that, take advantage of that, and then you start admiring somebody else, or you start contemplating sleeping with somebody else. Look, there's no saint here, there's no Superman here. It can happen to anybody. It can happen to any woman. It can happen to any man. You may never have done it before, but there's always a first time. All right. So that is all from John Maxwell. Right. There is a lot to say. There's a lot to share, but let's end there because of time. Now we can take questions and suggestions before we close. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you for being here. Again, let me add, today is not my birthday. My birthday is on Tuesday, not today. But I needed to do this today before Tuesday because Tuesday I may not have that time to do this. Thank you. God bless you. So let's take questions and observations before we wrap up. Right. So yes, anybody asking a question, let's see your hand. Anybody asking a question, let's see your hand. So I can see something here. Please, sir, in areas you have prayed and talked to your spouse in a polite manner and he continues in that area, which negatively affects the person's mental and family growth and finance. Way forward. Okay. Someone who respects the other person's perspective. Someone who seeks to add value to the other. Okay, that's a high-valued person. Thank you, Muturayo. Okay, so this is the only question we have here right now. So there is an issue with your spouse. You have addressed the matter. You have spoken to the person. You have done everything, and the person is not budging. And this situation is affecting your mental health, affecting blah, blah, blah. So what do I want to advise? Does anybody have an advice for my sister here? Anybody before I speak? Any advice? If you have been listening, any advice? Blessing, any advice? Any advice? Antonia, any advice? Any advice?
Sir, I believe sometimes, even when the spouse is not willing to change, you would be the one to adjust your own expectation towards them. If you can adjust your expectation, you still enjoy your marriage, even though the person has not changed. A lot of times, I believe it's our own expectation that sometimes affects us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you very much. Blessing. You have spoken like a truly wise woman. Yes, and I'm not flattering you. It's a fact. So, yes. So, let's imagine the worst. This thing is key. You've argued about it. You've nagged about it. You've disagreed about it. You've fought about it. You've done so many things about it, and it has not changed. What is the intelligent thing to do? Let's even leave Bible, let's leave psychology. What's the intelligent thing to do? Find your peace. Otherwise, this thing will kill you. And the devil wants to kill you before your time. And if the devil cannot kill you, he wants to mess your mind up. He wants to mess you up. If you cannot kill, he wants to mess you up. And this is one way the devil messes people up when he cannot kill them. It makes you focus on what you cannot change. One of the ways you can waste your life, and I'm talking to everybody here right now, not anybody in particular, one of the ways you can waste your life is by focusing on what you cannot control or change. You will waste your life fighting it, and you'll become grow and gray, and you will have wasted all your years, and you will achieve nothing. And guess what? All you will have achieved is sicknesses, disease, mental health issues. God forbid that you run mad. And the only thing that will have helped you is by you refocusing your mind, right? Adjusting your expectations, like Blessed said. That will have given you more sanity, more peace of mind, right? It will have given you. Now, I don't know if you were here earlier, but I shared from a book, Praying Big for Your Marriage. I shared from that book of how this woman, her husband loved riding bike. And one of those days, he was riding bike and he had a ghastly accident. And it was only God that saved him that he didn't lose his life. It took months before he became well. And guess what my guy did? After he became well and God delivered him. Do you know the first thing my guy did after he got well, after God delivered him from that ghastly accident? He wanted to withdraw a certain amount of money from their savings to go and buy another bike to start riding again. He had forgotten what God delivered him from. He had forgotten that he broke his hip bone or something. He had to go through surgery. He had to go through a serious process to get well. So the first thing this guy did after he got well was to go tell his wife that he wants to buy a bike. The wife said, "No, honey, you can't buy a bike." He said, "No, honey, I need to get a bike." "No, honey, don't get a bike." "No, honey, I need a bike." So do you know what the wife did? The wife said, "You know what? I'm not going to allow this thing, frustrate me. If you cannot remember what God delivered you from, I think that's his problem." You say, "Honey," she had a honest conversation and she clearly expressed to him without disrespecting him that this is, you already know what I would like, but I see that this is very important to you. If that's important to you, it's fine, So what she did was, number one, she showed support. Number two, she clearly stated that was not what she would like for him because of what he did to him in the past, right? And the number three, she did not voice out, but we believe that she was praying for him. So this guy bought the bike, right? Bought the bike, and then his first day riding the bike, I said this at the beginning, but I'm saying it for those who were not here early enough to hear this. So this guy, the first day he rode that bike, he had a very bad experience. He didn't have an accident, thank God, but he almost had a situation with two different cars. He had nauseating feelings, and by himself, do you know what this guy did? He rode the bike back to the shop where he got it from, and thankfully they gave him a refund. That was the last day he rode a bike. Now, this guy explained the story in that book, Praying Big for Your Marriage. I am happy to send the book to you. If you are on our marriage settings WhatsApp group, I will send the book on that group. All right, it will benefit you. It doesn't have too many pages. It's not a big book. It's a small book. Praying Big for Your Marriage. So you will see experiences there that will help you. So what should you do if you have been nagging and fighting and shouting over a particular matter and your spouse has refused to budge? Let it go. Find your peace. Continue to pray for your spouse. Just know that your spouse does not understand. That's why he or she is stuck in his or her ways. And then do what John Maxwell has suggested. Find the areas where you agree. Focus your 100% effort and energy on those areas where you agree, and stop focusing more on the areas where you don't agree. Otherwise, that's one place where you don't agree can mess up all other areas of your marriage. Before you know it will mess up your finance. Before you know it will mess up your sex life. Before you know it will mess up your relationship with your in-laws. Before you know it will mess up your job. You can't concentrate at work. Before you know it will spread like cancer and affect other areas that were good before. All right? So don't let that happen to you. How does a spouse cope who is not financially committed to his immediate family, but is more to the extended family? That's a serious. There are people like that who will spend money for, third party. If you come to him or her for your troubles, they will bankroll everything, but the family is suffering. That is not good. And I want to say that there's an underlying issue to that. Such people are people pleasers. It is important to them that they save their face before other people, so their family should understand and go starving, but other people should enjoy their best, that the best that they have to offer. That's not healthy, it's not fair, it's not right. But again, you cannot fight that person. Okay, let me hear opinions. Moturayo, do you have an opinion on how to manage that? Blessing, do you have an opinion? Antonia, do you have an opinion? Even if I didn't mention your name and you have maybe a practical experience to that, what can you share? Let's learn before I start blowing my grammar. Okay, so you have a spouse who will rather take care of others than his immediate family. How do you cope with that? Anybody? Anybody? Is anybody sharing? Okay, Diwali or person, please speak. Are you responding to this question? Is someone speaking? No one is speaking, so I should go on. Hello? Yes?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, sir. Go ahead.
What I would say is that you have to understand that you can't, like you rightly said during the seminar, you can't depend on your spouse for everything. He has areas or he or she has areas of weakness that you just can't change them.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be, if this has to do with finances, most likely, you have to be financially independent on yourself and cover those areas of his weakness. I mean, I remember my own parents. I remember my dad was, he's of late memory now. I remember he was more of like an introvert. My mom was even more introverted than my dad. So my dad was someone that he didn't really like, know people's birthdays, and all that, even to his own extended family. But, it was my mom that covered that patch because she understood his own weakness. So you have to get to the point whereby there's some things that that person just won't see. You have to start saving, start investing, start growing, looking for business opportunities, and to an extent be financially independent from your husband. There's some husbands that will say that I don't want my wife to be financially independent and what have you. But at the end of the day, if he sees the benefits and what you bring to the table, then he might just start changing his mind.
Yeah.
But don't pin your disappointments on him or her because, it just won't work. It will rather drive the two of you apart than bring you together.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to say.
Well spoken, sir. Well spoken. Thank you very much. While we are not saying, for the person who asked this question, while we are not saying it is a rosy journey, we are not saying it's easy, it's not as simple as it sounds, yes, but you know what? if you heard what my brother just said, I think that's a very good advice. Don't stop praying for him. You see, some people, when they hear pray for him, pray for her, they get angry. Like, look, can you tell me something else outside praying? Because I've been praying all my life. Okay, maybe you have been praying, but maybe you've not been listening. Because I know that one of the things that happens when we pray is that God gives us feedback. And sometimes the feedback we get in the place of prayer is not your prayer has been answered. Sometimes the feedback we get in the place of prayer is God pointing our hearts to the areas we should rather focus on. And like what somebody said, a lot of times you pray about a situation, and instead of God addressing the situation, it's addressing you to address the situation. So don't be angry because you've been praying a lot and it seems like God has not heard you. In the place of prayer, sometimes we receive instruction. In the place of prayer, sometimes we receive adjustments. In the place of prayer, sometimes we receive empowerment. So look at Sarah's maid. Do you know the story? Hagar. Hagar was Sarah's maid. Sarah was not able to give Abraham a child, so she suggested that her servant has a child for her husband. You know the story. So her husband eventually was pressured, into having an affair, sexual relationship with his wife's slave or servant, and then eventually they had a child, Ishmael. You know the story. And after Ishmael came, eventually God blessed Sarah as he promised, and Sarah had Isaac, and then Sarah started maltreating Hagar. You know the story. So this maltreatment became so chronic, so bad, that Hagar had to run away. So one day, Hagar packed her load, took her son, and Hagar ran away. She ran away from the house with her son. And on the way, she was in the desert or something, if I recall correctly, and her son was dying because they needed water. They had exhausted all the water they had. And as she was crying out to God for mercy, the Bible says the angel of the Lord appeared to her, and asked her, Hagar, servant of Sarah, where are you going and where are you coming from? Like God did not know. I said, oh, my Lord, I had to run away from the face of my master's wife, my madam, because she's a very wicked woman. See what she has been taking me through. See what she has been doing to me. See how she has been treating me. That woman is so heartless, So I just had to run for my life before that woman gives me mental health issues. And do you know what the angel of the Lord said? The angel of the Lord said, go back to that your wicked madam and submit yourself to her. And by the way, here is water for your son. So God gave her the water she needed, but told her to go back to that place of perennial. God asked her to go back to that place of pain. God asked her to go back to that place of trauma. You see, why I'm sharing this with you is to let you know that God's goal is not to make you happy. Because there are so many things that God will ask you to do that will not make you happy. But God's goal is for you to do His will. Because if you focus on obeying God and doing His will, you will eventually find a level of happiness that nothing in this life can give you. But the devil will tell you that fight for your happiness, fight for your happiness, fight for your happiness. And that will be all that will matter to you. And if you are so blinded by your present happiness, you will lose your long-term happiness. Right? So sometimes you might not be happy in the present moment, but God is working out for you a more lasting fulfillment, greater than what you are fighting for in the moment. So like my brother shared earlier, don't stop fighting about it. You have fought. How has your fighting helped you? You have shouted. How has your shouting helped you? You have argued. You have nagged. There were days that you didn't even talk to him. There were even days that maybe he said he wanted sex and said no. How should I give sex to a man who will not take care of his family but will go and take care of outsiders? You know what? So you've done all of that and it has not helped. So stop doing that. Adjust your expectations, like somebody said. find a side hustle, find business, side business, whatever. But you need to do something for yourself financially. It's important. My wife has her money, I have my money. And I'm happy that my wife has her money. My wife is able to do things for me with her money. She's able to surprise me with her money. I've shared countless times. Some people here might have heard my story before about a time in my life where I didn't have a job. 8 months, I was not able to provide. 8 months, that was many years ago. And my wife was fending for the family. My wife was feeding the family. My wife was paying children's school fees. My wife was giving me money. And nobody knew. Right? So, you want to be that woman who is able to do things for the family when your husband cannot. Whether due to his foolishness or due to circumstances, whatever. But you should be that woman who is able to fill in the gap. By the way, a man is not the sole provider in a home. It's not biblical. Any doctrine that tells you that the man is the sole provider is a demonic doctrine. It's not biblical. The Bible talks about the virtuous woman in the book of Proverbs chapter 31, I think. He said this woman was a businesswoman. She was doing stuff for her family with her own money, with her own enterprise. Did she not have a husband? And the Bible did not tell us that her husband was irresponsible. Not necessarily. Some people have that impression, but that's not what the Bible says. So there is no law in the Bible that says that the husband should be the sole provider in a marriage. But if you have a husband who will not allow you work or do business, who wants to be the sole provider, enjoy it. If you can still make your money with an online business, whatever, please make your money, keep your money, take care of yourself. But enjoy your husband's money. But if you are blessed with a husband who will still appreciate you working or contributing, it's a blessing. Do it and enjoy it and stop complaining. Stop saying, my friend, don't work. Why do I have to work? No, it's a blessing to work. Work is a blessing.
Good night.
Right?
Excuse me?
So, yes. Good evening.
What's happened?
Good evening. I can hear you. Do you have a question? Do you have a question? Okay. All right. So I hope that helps so that we don't overflow that matter. Right? So sometimes God is aware of your pain, but it does not mean that the will of God is outside the pain. I want you to know that. Bitter truth, but it is true. Sometimes God is aware of your pain, but His will may not necessarily be outside of your pain. So if all you want is just convenience, you might miss God's will. And that is not me telling you that stay in an abusive marriage. That is not me telling you that it doesn't matter what anybody does to you, just die there. That's not what I'm saying. Okay? All right? So I'm not saying that go and die because God wants you to go through pain. That's not the point here. Right? Thank you very much. Any other question? Somebody's raising his or her hand here. Do you have a question or a contribution? Please go ahead so that we can wrap up this 10:15. Yes? Is there a question? A contribution? Any other addition? I think that's all right. Thank you very much. I guess there's no further questions. Thank you for your time. Bless you. I appreciate your joining. And I hope that you learned one or two things. Thank you for celebrating my birthday with me through this session. Again, my birthday is on Tuesday, not today, all right? So you can still wish me happy birthday on Tuesday. That's my birthday. Thank you for joining.